Yeah, I guess we wait until 10:05.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So this sticking part is this auditorium.
Yes.
Yeah.
UFO.
All right. You can fly away. Right. And then, yeah, even that's the view of the mountains as well.
Yes. Yeah. But we are not very often. Nice auditorium. On least once in a while.
Right. Yeah. You start from like an introduction of OIST, so
okay, I don't have to.
Yeah.
No, I will just introduce you.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can start.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Well, maybe I go here for the microphone.
Yeah.
Hello everyone. Welcome to this MIAI invited lecture of Professor Kenji Doya. It's a pleasure to have him here. Actually, he was my former PhD supervisor. So it's great to have him here, to welcome him. So Kenji is currently a professor at the OIST Institute. You can see it on the picture. That's also where I did my PhD, in like one of these nice buildings. So Kenji did his PhD in 1991 at the University of Tokyo, and worked as a postdoc at the UC San Diego and the Salk Institute.
Salk Institute.
Salk Institute. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess Kenji started out a bit more technical reinforcement learning, and later he went more towards neuroscience. But in 1994 he joined the Advanced Telecommunications Research International (ATR), also in Japan, as a senior researcher, and then served as a group leader of the Kawato Dynamic Brain Project. In 2004, he was appointed as a principal investigator at OIST, and that's where you then moved to Okinawa. And since then, he is basically there. He was also there the vice provost for research till 2014. And yeah, so Kenji is basically part of a lot of like consortiums in AI in Japan. So it's a bit too much to actually list them all here. So I would give it to Kenji. So welcome again.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris, and also Xavier, for organizing this opportunity to introduce our work. Okay. Yeah. So as Chris introduced, I'm from this institute, OIST. So built on the hillside overlooking the ocean. So, but do you know where is Okinawa? So this is in the middle of the ocean, and then it takes a 2.5-hour flight from Tokyo. But you can come from also many different places in Asia. So we like not only the tourists, but also students and researchers to come here for international and interdisciplinary research. Yeah. So OIST is still a very young graduate university. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. So we have around 80 faculty members. So if you divide the output by the headcount, the result can be largely fluctuating because of the small denominator. And luckily, last time the Nature Index ranked us in the world number 9. Surprisingly above Princeton, Stanford, and MIT. So I hope this is not just a random fluctuation, but it continues. But this is a kind of a very new institute. So if you're interested, like doing research here or have a joint collaboration, yeah, please let me know. And because our lab was one of the first lab to be started in OIST, I wanted to make my own lab, which is called the Neural Computation Unit, to be interdisciplinary by itself. So one part of my lab tried to create adaptive learning systems. And another part of the lab tried to understand the brain's mechanism for adaptive learning. So we do machine learning and robotic research, and also some works with rats and mice to study how their brain realize learning. Okay, so because I've been working on these areas of machine learning and neuroscience, many people ask me what is the relationship between AI and the brain science. And some people say that to make intelligent machines by electronics, you don't need to bother the biological constraints. But some other people say, because there's already a very good implementation like our brain, why don't we reverse engineer that successful example, right? So, and then history swung back and forth between these two extremes. And then previously, the AI was like coding human knowledge and then skills. So there was no direct reason to learn directly from the brain. But more recently, the AI is based on learning from the big data. And in doing that, people realize that the brain-like structure, like artificial neural network, shows a very high performance. So that's why many people are, again, interested in learning from the brain. So, for example, deep learning is one good example of successful utilization of the knowledge from neuroscience for engineering. So the early finding is that in the visual cortex, there are many neurons which capture particular features in the scene. And then computer scientists, mathematicians, theoreticians like Rosenblatt came up with the idea that by combining these feature detectors, you can build a pattern recognition machine. And the neurobiologists found that those feature detectors are not prefixed, but also learned by experience. So, and also the theoreticians came up with the idea of how to train multi-layer neural networks. And then indeed, the biologists found that in the higher level of this visual system or like a hippocampus, indeed, there's an abstract coding like a place cell or face cell. Right? And then more recently, the people applied the deep neural networks for large data set in the internet, and for example, found like a cat-faced neuron in the higher layer of the neural network. So I think there has been a very helpful interaction between the researchers in the neuroscience and artificial intelligence in the development of the more adaptive machines and a better understanding of how the brain works. And my own work is on learning to act in the framework of reinforcement learning. So in this framework, the early finding was by the neuroscientists and the psychologists. So using rats or the pigeons, and they realized that the prediction of the forthcoming reward, like associating sound with food, or like picking a certain pot with the food pellet, that kind of association or the prediction of the reward is very important for behavior learning. And then based on such knowledge, the Andy Bartow and Rich Sutton developed a modern theory of reinforcement learning, which is called the temporal difference learning, based on the prediction of the future reward. And also neurobiologists found that there are some neurons in the brain which respond to the prediction of the future reward. This is shown by the neurons producing the neurotransmitter dopamine. And also the dopamine is also involving the plasticity in the brain. So from such knowledge, people came up with a brain implementable architecture for reinforcement learning. And that further accelerated the studies of reinforcement learning in the neuroscience community. And then most recently, this kind of architecture has been used in the core of the artificial intelligence programs, for example, solving a computer game. And also the most recently, the ChatGPT uses a reinforcement learning in a part of the answering mechanism. So I think also this kind of interaction between the neuroscientists and then psychologists with the AI researchers are very important. So then the question I want to discuss today is that while deep learning and reinforcement learning were like two examples of success of learning from the brain, and then what else should we further learn from the brain for the design of the future artificial intelligence? So I think there are many different ideas, but I want to raise three major points. So one is the kind of energy efficiency. Right. So today's deep neural network work depend on the GPUs or cluster of GPUs, which consume a lot of energy and produce a lot of heat. On the other hand, our brain is supposed to consume just around 20 watts of power. So how you can implement such an intelligent mechanism with a high energy efficiency? That is something we should address, especially these days for the concern of the environmental sustainability. And also, in addition to energy, so data efficiency is an important component. For example, ChatGPT produces a very nice understanding of the language and the response, but it takes a huge amount of text data, which nobody, real person, can go through in the lifetime. So compared to that, the kids can learn language and learn about knowledge of the world with a much smaller amount of experience. Right? So how such data efficient learning is possible, that is also a very important topic. I will raise several points regarding that. And also another important domain would be like autonomy and sociality. So current AI programs are built for a specific purpose. For example, detecting certain objects, or driving a car, or playing a game of Go. But humans and animals do not have a certain goal specified by other people. Each agent, each animal or humans decide what kind of a life they will follow, and then find some position in the society to survive, and then hopefully reproduce. Right? And then so such a kind of flexibility or autonomy is very important, and also that is associated with the recognition of your status in the society, so that you are well integrated into the society. So that is something probably necessary for a human compatible AI agent in the near future. Right. So I will talk about such points toward the end. Right. Okay, so first, the energy efficiency is not necessarily my area of research, but Japan has like a flagship computer, K computer, and recently more next version called Fugaku computer, which was ranked in the top of the supercomputing ranking. And then we try to use such a resource for simulation of the brain. So my colleagues has shown that essentially you can simulate the entire human brain in a single neuron resolution in terms of the memory and the computing capacity. Yeah, but the problem is that we don't need to, we don't exactly know how those neurons are connected and the particular algorithm for learning. So it's just a demonstration of capacity. So, such simulating the entire human brain is feasible in today's supercomputers. But one problem is that such a huge machine consumes a lot of power, like even the power of a single power plant. So then how to make such a brain-like a computer more power efficient is a very important problem. So the recently companies like Intel and IBM are producing neuromorphic chips, which mimics the kind of processing in the neuron in the hardware level. And also new devices like memory star, which mimics the function of the synapses. Adaptive connection between the neurons is drawing a lot of attention. So this kind of development at the device level may help us build neuromorphic computers, which is much more like energy efficient for the kind of computing we do with the artificial neural networks. Okay, so then the regarding the efficiency, so I think there are several important points, like using like a model of the world, and then utilizing modularity, and also the learning to learn or meta learning. I would go through some of the topics, mostly from our lab. So because we work on the topic of reinforcement learning, so I will present some works in this framework. So the reinforcement learning is a framework for an agent which can be humans or animals or a robot or a software to interact with the environment, and then get the reward feedback, evaluate how good or bad the agent is performing. And the goal of learning is come up with the action policy, which is like mapping from the state to action that maximize the reward acquired in the long run. So, and coming up with a robust and efficient algorithm for artificial agents is a very important topic in AI and computer science. Understanding the neural circuit and then molecular mechanism of reinforcement learning in the brain is a very important topic in the neuroscience. And then once you make a progress in one side, that will give you some kind of a hint for the other side. And once you hit a certain problem in one side, maybe that will be a problem setting for the other side. So that's why we work on these topics in a concurrent way. So, for example, this is a kind of old work which I did when I was still in the ATL together with Avi Brashon. Yeah, so this is the project of letting robots learn to stand up. So this robot is like a 70 centimeter high and has 2 joints and then a gyroscope, so that it can detect whether he is lying down or standing up. Right? So, and then we gave a positive reward based on how high the head has raised from the floor. And when it fell down, we gave a negative reward or punishment. And after many hundreds bumps and falls, the robot could learn this kind of a sequence of a behavior. Right? And the important point is that initially the robot keeps the head to the floor. So that means immediate reward is zero. But once the robot put his weight on the foot, it can stand up subsequently. So this is a very simple example of a so-called delayed reward task, right? So being able to solve the learned behavior, sequence of actions from the delayed reward, that is a very important aspect of reinforcement learning, right? And also by doing this kind of experiment, we learn how to let the robots learn, right? So and the reinforcement learning has several parameters, and then depending on those parameter setting, robots learning vary a lot. For example, one of the parameter is how long delayed reward you take into account. So if you set the parameter very small, the robot tend to find out a quick solution. For example, just sitting up with like a small immediate reward. And also the balance between reward and punishment is important. So if you make this punishment for falling very strong, so sometimes robots just learn to lay down to avoid any punishment. That is not really what you want. So yeah, so even though the algorithms of reinforcement learning are very well established, such a meta aspect, how to set the parameter or how to design reward function, that's a very important issue in practical application in reinforcement learning. And recently, so this reinforcement learning over learning from delayed reward has been applied to many different tasks. One of the epoch-making result was for the application to the game of Go. So in the game of Go, after tens of stones, finally the result of winning or losing is decided. So with the reinforcement learning, so this so-called value network can predict by watching the intermediate state of the board and then predict whether the white or black is winning or losing. So if you have a very high performance prediction, so you don't need to try all the stone locations. You can focus your search, and also you don't need to predict to the end of the game. So that's why with the help of this reliable reward prediction network, the game of Go, which are supposed to be impossible to beat humans in the coming 20, 30 years, was actually became possible to show like a human champion level performance, right? So that is also important progress by combination of reinforcement learning and the deep neural networks, right? Okay, so and in reinforcement learning, so we have three major computation. One is the prediction of the future reward from the current state or for a certain action. So this VO-base is called the state value function, estimating how much reward you are going to get in the future, starting from a certain state S, right? So E is the expectation over the scarcity of your policy and environmental dynamics. And here gamma is a temporal discounting parameter to control how long into the future you take into account. So if gamma is 0, you just focus on the immediate result. As the gamma goes close to 1, you take into account the longer delayed outcome. And this Q of SA is called the action value function. So evaluating the goodness of a particular action taken in a given state. Right. So then you can select an action based on a reward prediction. One typical way is use this action value function for a given state, look for action that maximize the future reward. So that is called a greedy action selection. And in the early learning, you want to perform a stochastic search. So in that case, a common way is to take action value as a kind of negative potential, so that the action with a higher action value function is selected with a higher probability. So here beta is called the inverse temperature. So if beta is 0, you take all the actions equally, and the beta is increased, the action becomes more greedy. And then after taking action, you learn from the actual result. based on the discrepancy between the reward you predicted before taking action and the reward you experienced after the taking action. So here the V of ST is the prediction of the cumulative future reward before taking action. And after taking action, you get the reward R. And then from the subsequent state, you can still predict the future reward. Based on this exponential discounting, so if you by multiplying the gamma for the next state value, so these first two terms and the last term should be equal, cancel out if your prediction is perfect. So otherwise, you will learn from the discrepancy. So you will update your previous reward prediction in proportion to this error. So here, alpha is a learning rate parameter to control how quickly you learn or how quickly you forget the past. So, and then implementing these steps of prediction, action, and then learning is a very important topic for implementation of reinforcement learning. For example, like a stable use of a deep neural network for this value function approximation is one of the major breakthroughs by the people at the DeepMind for the good scaling of the reinforcement learning to realistic tasks. And also the tuning of these parameters, like a temporal discounting or inverse temperature or learning rate, that is also a very important practical issue in the application of reinforcement learning. And why these are important for like engineering applications of reinforcement learning. So we think that these are also very important topic for neuroscience. So our brains may not be using exactly the same equations, but the prediction of the reward and action selection and the learning from the result is something our brain should be realizing. So then how these are computed in the different parts of the brain, and also how these parameters are regulated, possibly by some kind of a chemical system, that is a very interesting topic. So, and then regarding the implementation of the reinforcement learning in the brain, so many people, including myself, suspect that the structure called the basal ganglia, which is wrapped underneath the cerebral cortex, play a very important role. The one reason for that is this input side of the basal ganglia called stratum receive a stronger dopaminergic input, which is related to reward processing. And particularly the Wolfram Schultz, who is now in the Cambridge, showed that dopamine neurons showed activities very similar to a temporal difference error, like reward prediction error. And also our colleague at OIST, Jeff Wickens, found that the stratum has a specific form of a learning mechanism called dopamine-dependent synaptic plasticity, right? So then this structure suggests the basal ganglia is making a very important role in reinforcement learning. So our specific hypothesis was that some of the neurons in the stratum, which protects the pallidum and thalamus and bacterial cortex, may learn like action value function, which is used for like competitive action selection in this cortical basal ganglia loop. And some other neurons which project to dopamine neurons may be used for like reward prediction error. So we have been performing a series of experiments to test it. And then most recently, my former PhD student, Tomohiko, used cell type specific neural imaging. So these neurons shown in green are known to be connected to the dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra. And then he led the mouse to associate odor cue with a forthcoming water reward. And in this task, he found that as soon as the mouse smells like cue, so before the actual reward is presented, some of the neurons increase their activity. So that is consistent with a hypothesis that some of the neurons projecting to the dopamine neurons in the striatum are involved in learning a state value function. So, and many other people in the neuroscience committee is now addressing how exactly reinforcement learning is implemented in the circuit in and around the basal ganglia. So, but the framework I have shown so far is so-called model-free reinforcement learning. So we don't assume any knowledge of the agent about the world, and then they just learn state action values by the sequence of experience of a state action reward and state action reward. And so the processing is relatively simple, and then just taking action and then update the value function. But in order to learn like a complex task, for example, with a long delayed reward, it takes a lot of trials. So on the other hand, in the model-based framework, agents learn the prediction model from the certain state by performing action, what kind of a new state is observed. So if you have such an internal model, you can run the kind of internal simulation, for example, to estimate the current state, even though the current sensory input is not available, or plan ahead for the future action to reach to the desired state. So this is a bit of a complex strategy to predict the current or future and then take an appropriate action. So it allows a more flexible adaptation to the environmental change or setting the different goals, but internal computation can be quite heavy. So how you select between the different strategies or how you possibly combine them, that is, I think, an important topic, both for engineering applications and neuroscience. For example, this is the work by my former PhD student, Pablo, of like letting this smartphone robot bounce up and balance. Right? So because the smartphones have a very nice sensors and the computers, by adding 2 wheels, we can make a mobile robot. So by initially doing this kind of almost random movement, the robot gathers the data about how the body responds to the wheel movement and build the internal model of the dynamics, and then use the offline simulation to train the controller. So then within less than 10 physical trials, the robot could realize this kind of a balancing behavior. Right? So this is one example of the data efficiency of a model-based strategy. Yeah, so when the similar strategy is taken by humans or animal, we can call it mental simulation. So brain processing using an action-dependent state transition model. So S prime of F of SA, this is a determinist case. And in more general, this is the state transition probability depending on the action. So if you have such a model, so you can apply that to the past state and action to estimate the current state, which is helpful when the sensory input is noisy or delayed or occluded. And you can apply such a model to the current state to find out what is the right action to reach to the desired state. And you can apply such a model to an arbitrary state for like imagination and the thought experiment. Right? So such a mechanism for like imagination would be very important basis for the use of language, and also for us to come up with a scientific theory. Right? So I think mental simulation is a very important function of our brain, starting from a sensory motor control to a higher level cognitive functions. And then addressing the neural circuit mechanism allow us to run a simulation in the head. That is a very exciting, important topic for neuroscience. And today's computers are very good at running simulation. Once we have the dynamic equations well defined concretely. But we have some capability to build like an approximate model from our sensory motor experience and use that for inference. So how such a like adaptive building a model and the utilization is reorder in the brain is a very intriguing topic. And if you have a better understanding of that, maybe we can build a more like adaptive computer AI program, which can perform reasonably well, even with a limited experience in the environment. So regarding the implementation of mental simulation in the brain, we have done several works. For example, this is the computer game that my former student developed. So moving this cursor from here to here. But to make the game interesting, we limited the movement of the cursor only 3 of the 8 neighborhoods by pressing one of the 3 buttons. So for certain direction, there's no direct path. So you have to find out some kind of a zigzag path to the goal, right? So we call it like a grid sailing task, something that you have to do in sailing upwind, right? And the point is that this kind of a trajectory is rather difficult to find just by random exploration. But once you have a action-dependent state transition model, you can find this kind of path relatively efficiently. And we did, we verified from the subject behavior that with the pre-training with this schema, the subjects can perform better when they are given a pre-start delay time after the goal is presented, before they actually start the key pressing. Right? And we are interested in what was happening in the subject brain when they are doing such a mental simulation. And then we found that the higher activity of the parietal cortex, which is known to be involved in the spatial processing, and also the premotor cortex, which is known to be involved in a sequence of actions, and also the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is known to be involved in spatial working memory. And in addition to these cortical areas, we found activities in the cerebellum, which is in the back of the brain, and also the basal ganglia, which we suppose to be involved in reinforcement learning. So our interpretation of this data is that different brain parts may be involved in a different role. For example, cerebellum has been suggested to be working as like a supervised learning machinery, which is helpful for building an internal model. Like, for example, if you give press a certain key, what will be the movement of the cursor? And then you can learn such a mapping based on the previous experience, and then train like a supervised learning machinery. And also, basal ganglia may be used for evaluating how good or bad such a predicted state is. And then cerebral cortex with this the unsupervised representation learning capability hold a representation of the sensory state or like a predicted action, and then connect the predictor and the evaluator in the cerebellum, the basal ganglia appropriately. So, and hopefully we can use some kind of a neural decoding mechanism to clarify what are the roles of the particular activation of these areas. So, and then we are starting to better understand how the mental simulation is realized in the brain. And we also are interested in the mechanism of the brain for mental simulation in the cellular level. This is the work of my former postdoc, Akihiro Funamizu, in collaboration with my colleague at OIST, Bernd Kuhn, who is an expert of optical neural imaging. So by removing the skull and implanting a glass plate, we can observe the activities of the neurons in the cortical surface using this microscope using infrared light. So this is a virtual environment in which the mouse walks on the airflow to the ball, and then the sound feedback is changed accordingly. So when the mouse walks toward the sound source, he is giving sugar water reward. And while the mouse is performing this task, we could record like hundreds of neurons in the area called the parietal cortex. So, and then we performed like a Bayesian decoding of this neural activity. We first identified the distance tuning of these neurons. And from the instantaneous activity of neurons, we can infer like a posterior probability of the distance encoded by the activity of these neurons. And then the interesting finding was that when we shut off the auditory feedback, this decoded neural activity advanced with the following the actual distance. So it is expected that the mouse can perform some kind of basic form of mental simulation based on how many steps you have taken, the update, the representation of the goal distance, even when the sensory feedback is not available. And then when the sensory feedback turned on, this representation became much sharper. So that is something similar to what we do with the Kalman filtering or like a dynamic Bayesian inference. So, and then this is the first step trying to address the mechanism of mental simulation in the neuronal level, but a better understanding of such a circuit mechanism would allow us to understand how the brain implement the flexible building and the use of the model of the world. And then in addition to the use of this mental simulation, so another important aspect is like a modular structure of the brain. For example, in the previous work, we showed that these areas activate when the mental simulation is performed. But the question is why such areas that necessary is activated. So we assume that our brain has some kind of modular structure, and then depending on the task demand, the required areas are activated and then connected. So the kind of MRI study we have shown assumes such a feature of the brain to address the different function of the brain in the different parts. But we don't know exactly how such activation and the connection is realized in the brain. So that I think that is a very important mechanism behind the flexibility of the processing by the brain. Yeah, so there are some studies about how different modules in the brains can be connected, right? So, for example, my former colleague, Mitsuo Kawato, and then Daniel Wolpert came up with a framework that the brain has many prediction models, and then fitting of the prediction and the actual observation would be the key for the selecting the right module. And then I also worked on the reinforcement learning version of such a model. And then recently, like architecture like a transformer has been shown to be very effective from a large heterogeneous data. So there should be some kind of a like mechanism to select the right context for producing a certain output. So yeah, so what would the similarity or difference between the like a transformer architecture and the brain architecture, I think would be a very interesting research topic. And also on the neuroscience side, there are some ideas about how different neural modules can be selected. For example, the basal ganglia may be used not only to select a particular action, but also to select certain modules in the brain. And also the cerebral cortex has different types of inferior neurons. They may be used for gating the inputs or gating the outputs. So I hope better understanding of the brain mechanism for the modularity, together with the analysis of the successful like artificial neural network, will better allow us to better understand how the flexible combination of the modulars areas in the brain and how we can use it for different purposes for the artificial neural networks. Right. Okay, so the mental simulation and the modularity, and also another important topic is learning to learn. For example, tuning these parameters for learning. So this is our robot, which we call cyber rodent. So it has a camera and then look for the battery pack and then reach to the pack to recharge. That is a large positive reward. And then by learning, it can go to the target in a more straight path. And this robot was initially doing random exploration, but somehow learned to just sit still, even though this battery pack is visible. So it goes to that only when it's very close. If it's farther than a certain distance, he's not interested anymore. So we thought, why this robot is so depressed? But the reason was this setting of this temporal discounting parameter. So if a gamma setting is small, like a gamma square, gamma cube, go quickly to 0. So if in a case, you have to pay certain cost to get a big reward. So the weighted summation can be negative. So in that case, it's better doing nothing. So resulting in something like a depressed state. But in some other cases, your action is associated with a positive immediate reward, but a delayed punishment. You cannot resist this temptation and result in impulsive behavior. So this temporal discounting factor is a very interesting parameter in reinforcement learning to affect the character of a reinforcement learning agent. And in fact, one of the that was the topic of Chris's PhD thesis, how to select the right temporal discounting parameter depending on the task demand. Right, and then selecting the right time frame is very important for robots, but also probably important for humans and animals as well. So because we have to survive in a very different environments with different constraints. And then the brain should have some mechanism to control how long-term you think about or whether you will focus on the immediate result. And we came up with a hypothesis that the brain's neurochemical called serotonin may have something to do with this temporal discounting. The intuition for that was that most of the drugs used for the therapy of depression have the capability to increase the serotonin function. So maybe that can bring this type of brain back to this type of the brain. Right? So from this picture, you may think the gamma is larger, the better. But if the gamma is very close to 1, you have to predict the long future. Then the prediction becomes more challenging. So gamma has to be large enough, but not too large. So that's why you need to have a right tuning. And then we suspected that in our brain, the neurotransmitter serotonin may be used for such a tuning. So dopamine and serotonin is one of the so-called neuromodulators. They are a kind of a neurotransmitter, but the origin is in the brainstem, and then they project diffusely to the entire brain. So they are supposed to broadcast certain scalar variable, right? So it has been shown that dopamine signals temporal difference reward prediction error. And we came up with a hypothesis that other neuromodulators encode different parameters of the reinforcement learning, like learning rate or exploration, and the temporal discounting by serotonin. And then recently, we can use like a molecular biology to test such a hypothesis. So this is like a genetically engineered mouse, so which produce light-sensitive molecule to the cells that produce serotonin. Right? So by the blue light, we can stimulate the serotonin neurons, and the yellow light just reset the stimulation. So the mouse waits for the food pellet after 3 seconds, 6 seconds, 9 seconds, or infinity. Right. So for the 9-second reward, the mouse often abandons waiting, but by blue light stimulation, such abandoning error became smaller. And for infinity trial, usually they abandon after 10 seconds, but with the blue light stimulation, they could wait much longer. So this is consistent with the hypothesis that serotonin enhances the variation for the delayed reward. Right? So, and this is one mechanism for kind of a meta learning. So how to control the parameter of your learning algorithms. So, but probably our brain has many other mechanisms for meta learning or learn to learn, and then extracting those and implementing into artificial agents would be a very important topic in AI in the future. Right. So then finally, I would like to talk about some autonomy and sociality. Right. So in the project of tuning the temporal discounting parameter and also addressing the balance between the reward and punishment, we hit like a theoretical problem. Like a reward and the temporal discounting parameter is part of the objective function of reinforcement learning. So then how can we allow tweaking such objective function? So then you have to set up certain higher level goal. And then so we started to ask, what is the origin of the reward? So and there are different kinds of rewards. For example, for animals, we use food and water for the positive reward and electric shock or other things for the negative reward. And in human society, money is a stronger reward, and also social status, maybe other form of reward. But we focused on the most critical constraints for biological systems. So that is self-preservation and then self-reproduction, right? So survival and reproduction. So if you lack one of these features, such species will go extinct soon. So all of the existing species have such features of survival and reproduction. And our reward system is presumably linked with such important constraints, like food and water and pain for survival, and then sexual desire or social attachment for reproduction. Right? And we wanted to make something similar for the robots. So this robot catches the battery pack and recharges itself for survival. And then even though it is not impossible for a robot to manufacture itself, so we settle with software reproduction. So these robots have an infrared communication port, so they can copy the entire program or having a common program and then copy the parameters of the program. So this way we can implement software reproduction. And then this kind of colony stay surviving as long as the sufficient energy is supplied. And then once they are well charged, they start to look for possible mating partners and then start like mating or like gene exchange behaviors. Yeah, so it's taking time to show up. But anyway, so for each hardware robot, we implemented multiple software agents which come to life in a time-shared manner. And each software agent had weights for the basic neural network and the parameters for the reward function and the parameters for reinforcement learning. And when they copy these parameters, the better charged the robot is, the more likely that that parameter is used in the next generation. And then we introduced some random mutation, and each robot has some lifetime. And after the robot dies by age or by using up all the energy, so another agent is created. So this way we could implement a distributed evolution of parameters of reinforcement learning in this robot. And then we could see the parameters of reinforcement learning can evolve over generations. For example, the temporal discounting parameter initially randomly set converges very close to 1. And in addition to the parameters, we could see the robots find its own reward functions. So for these robots, charging the battery or successful mating is the primary reward. But it is very difficult for the robot to find the behavior just based on such a primary reward. Like we have smells and taste to guide us to nutritious objects. So we gave this robot a visual reward. When the battery pack comes into the vision, it can be a source of reward. But the particular form, depending on the angle and distance, was free. But after evolution, those robots, which has a higher reward, finding a battery pack in the middle, in the center of a blue, closer to the robot, has a higher reward. So these guys survived. And for we also gave a visual reward for finding other robots. So, and in this case, the visual rewarders had a somewhat different profile because this infrared communication was easier when at a certain distance rather than being very close to each other. So this shows that by combining reinforcement learning and the evolutionary framework, we can let the robot to learn the reward function and the parameters like a temporal discounting. And then we also found some interesting phenomenon like heterogeneity within the colony. Right? So interesting situation is that when the robot finds a battery pack on one side and another robot, so further to go for charging and go for mating. Right? And some robots kind of always go for charging, and some robots took opportunity for mating with another robot. And then my former postdoc, Stefan Elfing, did a gene analysis of these robots, and he indeed found two separate subpopulations within the same colony. So those green guys start mating only after when they are fully charged, and red guys start mating even when they are half or less charged. So this is two different strategies. So certainty of a fertile mating or just a number of mating you perform during your lifetime. And then we found that there's kind of stationary crossover point for these two strategies. So and this this showed that even like a multiple solution can be found in evolving and reinforcement learning robots. So, but these robots became too old. So recently we use this kind of a smartphone robots for the motor behavior, like balancing and also going to the wireless charging station and reproduction by showing the genetic code in a QR code format. And in this case, just the behavior of balancing was copied from one robot to the other, right? So we are going to use this platform in the next phase. So, and we have demonstrated that the robot can learn a part of its goal of the behavior, and also there can be some kind of variety of solutions. So, and then some people may start to argue that is it okay to give you such robot such an autonomy? So the AI agents that can find its own goals and then ways to solve it can have a potential benefit, like creating a novel theory of science and technology, or new culture, or even a new industry. But you have to address the potential danger of such autonomous robots. Right? For example, there can be some kind of overruns or unexpected side effects, but more immediately, so exploitation by like some countries or terrorists for such using such autonomous robot is also a very important issue, right? So and then the how to control such misuse or danger of autonomous AI is a very important topic discussed these days. But I think important point is learning from the human societies. So because human is known to be very dangerous species. So AI can be dangerous. Human has been shown to be very dangerous. So we have sent many species to extinction, and the human beings themselves has drove themselves to near extinction by the nuclear war or environmental destructions these days. But human societies also develop mechanisms to avoid such dangers. So I think the democracy is an important component. So not to give unlimited power to a single person or a small group, right? So, and then politically, we implement election, term limits, separation power, and also in the economy, we implement anti-monopoly or right to strike, and also the information disclosure, right? So to avoid over-concentration of power. So probably in the future society where the AI and the humans work together, so it is very dangerous to give a certain AI program for all the control of the society. So there should be some kind of a heterogeneous collection of AI programs, and then they may be peer reviewing with each other, and that they should be open sourced for the explainability. So that is something that we should implement in the near future society of AI and humans. And in thinking of that, maybe we can borrow some intuition from the brain. The previous classic idea is that the old part of the brain, like amygdala, is like an animal brain, and the neocortex is the more rational human brain. But recent work showed something opposite. So in the task of sharing a reward, so when some people take a more selfish choice, so their prefrontal cortex activated. So the people who tend to take a egalitarian choice have a higher activity in the older part of the brain, like the amygdala. And a similar feature has been found for the volume of the brain. The people who can take a selfish action tend to have a more developed prefrontal cortex. So after coming to France, I often see a motto liberté, the égalité, and then fraternité. So that is a very important policy in this country. But probably there's something similar. So preferring the fair share of the reward may be built in a very old part of your brain. So probably in the future AI programs, such a tendency for like a fairness and avoiding the over concentration of the power, that will be a very important function which we should implement in the very core operating system of the AI programs in the future. Right, yeah, so that is all for today. So, from our project, we've performed the internal symposium of AI brain science, and one topic of this symposium was the AI and the society. So we published the position paper in this special issue of Neural Networks, and if you're interested, please check this paper together with Stuart Russell. Yeah. Okay, so and then we think that there are many things to learn from the brain for the future AI, like energy efficiency, data efficiency, and autonomy and the social awareness. So maybe we don't have an off-the-shelf solution for neuroscience, but the collaboration of the neuroscientists and the AI researchers will allow us to better understand how the brain implements these features, and then borrow such intuition for the building of the future AI agents. Okay, thank you very much for your attention and patience.
Thank you, Kenji. That was great overview talk. Yeah. We have some time for questions if the audience has some. Don't hesitate.
Yeah.
So maybe I ask. Yes. No,
yeah.
I do after.
Yeah.
Maybe I have one. My curiosity, because I think the different topics were quite interesting. I was wondering, maybe on the modularity side.
Yeah.
What do you think, or what would be your insights connecting brain and AI on feature selection, or when you have environments with many dimensions, action or state spaces? What would be the connection between what is done in AI or robotics and what would be done in the brain?
Yeah, so both brain and the AI has a same constraint that they need to learn from the kind of experience they have. So in a new situation, you have to learn from a limited experience. So if you have a lot of data, so high dimension state space with elaborate prediction or policy function is preferred, but in the early phase, so you have to select a simpler solution, right? So such a dynamic control of the complexity of the model and the policy is probably important both for our brain and the AI programs. But there are very important difference in the biological brain and the AI programs. So one is that AI programs are directly connected to the internet, right? And also the digital brain can be saved and copied as much as you like. So something like a telepathy or brain transplant is impossible in the biological brain, but easily possible in a digital brain. So that can be a very good strength of the digital brain. So I think the success of programs like GPT is rely on such a feature. So it can collect a lot of data through the internet, and also you can save the pre-trained network and then deploy it in many different instances. So in the human case, even if you have some genius, so the usage of such a ingenuity is limited to his lifetime. So the being able to copy the heavily trained network and then even further retrain such a network, that is a strength of the digital brain. So I think we should utilize the strengths of both the biological brain and then digital brains. Yes.
Thank you for this very interesting and very thorough talk. I have a question about diversity. So you are talking about reproducing, exchanging program, and it's also everything is very targeted toward optimization. And so my question is that so I have two questions. One is, does this allow us to preserve some diversity over the individual, or does the most optimal one will be selected in the end? And the other thing is that, independently from this question, is that do you think it is a feature of nature, or in this case of the brain, that diversity will be eliminated in the end? There are less and less diversity in the world in terms of species, but also in terms of languages and so on and so forth, or that it is not the case.
Okay, yeah. So that is an interesting point. So in this experiment, we found even in a very simple environment. So this kind of a heterogeneity of the strategy was observed. So in our experiment, we found such a heterogeneity in about 20% of the environment. So in some cases, the single strategy is dominating the population. But probably as we move to a more complex environment, so rather than a single strategy, different strategies finding their own niches would be more robustly seen. And then even for the same task, some kind of a role taking, division of roles by the different agent may become useful. So I think even in AI agents learning and evolution, heterogeneity can happen in a certain environment. And also in usage of AI programs, probably relying on the solution by single AI program is very dangerous. So probably the AI program with a different architecture, with somewhat different training data set, may be preferred to check for the robustness of the solution, and then avoid the relying on the extreme solution that may come out from a certain implementation.
Maybe I have one last question.
Yeah.
So we saw that there's a lot of modules in the brain, even very detailed ones, like model-based, model-free, reinforcement learning.
Yeah.
Do you think we know already more or less all these kind of models and processes, or is there something like in physics, like a dark matter, where we know there's but we don't know really what is it?
Yeah, so the architecture of, for example, the visual cortex is very well studied, but more like a frontal part or like an internal wall of the brain, they are like less, their roles are less clear. So and then, so these days we are getting more and more data from the animal brain and the human brain. So it is, I think, possible that new areas or a new role for the known areas is coming up in the future. Right.
Okay. Yeah, with this, I think we thank again, Kenji.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Already 40 here, so he just came yesterday. We will meet this afternoon already again. So if you would like to talk with him, it's now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Or you have to go to Okinawa.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.